What is the useOptimistic hook and how does it work? Recent versions of React introduced server components and server actions to shift some of the rendering and logic responsibilities to the server. Along with those updates, React added a new hook called useOptimistic to keep UIs responsive while waiting for an async action to complete in the background. While this is often used for fetching data from a server, it's not limited to that. The hook is generally useful for handling async operations, ensuring the UI remains smooth and interactive while the action runs. Let's take a look at what the useOptimistic hook is and how it contributes to making snappy and responsive UIs. The useOptimistic hook helps manage optimistic updates in the UI, a strategy in which you provide immediate updates to the UI based on the expected outcome of an action, like waiting for a server response. Here's the basic syntax of the useOptimistic hook. useOptimistic state is the temporary state that updates right away for a better user experience. addOptimistic is the function that applies the optimistic update before the actual state changes. Actual state is the real state value that comes from the result of an action, like fetching data from a server. Update function is the function that determines how the optimistic state should update when called. At first glance, it might seem like the useOptimistic hook is just another way to handle loading states in React, but it's more than that. A loading state controls whether you see a spinner message or some other indicator in the UI, while something happens in the background. However, the useOptimistic hook updates the UI instantaneously based on an expected outcome, even before you, say, make a call to an API. This hook gives you a chance to show a loading indicator or message, handle potential errors gracefully, and show instant feedback to make the UI feel snappy. This will become clearer as we go through some examples showing how the useOptimistic hook works. Here's an action that simulates saving a task to a server. It returns a task after a 1-second delay, as it could happen with a real-world API request. Here's the code that sets up the useOptimistic hook by importing and initializing it, with a handle submit function that sends an input to the action. In the code, the useOptimistic hook keeps a temporary list of tasks that updates immediately when you add a new task. This line here ensures that a new task appears with a pending status even before the server confirms something is coming from the form. When the form is submitted, the handle submit function extracts the task and adds it optimistically with the addOptimistic task parameter. Then add task is passed as a prop, which sends the task to the server. Finally, the form is reset by calling e.target.reset. Here's the task list component. Here we are looping through the optimistic task parameter to display the task. When task.pending is true, the text adding task ... is displayed next to the task, confirming that the task has been added optimistically before the server confirms it. Here's the task component that manages the state for the form. It calls the saveTask function from the action so it can add the task, and appends the new task once it is received by the server. This ensures snappy UI updates by showing instant feedback instead of waiting for a response. Once the task is saved, the pending property is removed, and the final task list updates accordingly. Here's the UI. There are two things happening that are not supposed to happen. Firstly, you can't see the adding task ... text since it appears and disappears too quickly. Next, there's an error occurring after adding the task. Here's the error message. There are two things we need to do to address those issues. Firstly, we need to import start transition from React and use it to wrap this line. Secondly, we need to make the add task ... text visible for some time before it goes away. So to do this, we can modify the add task function with a pending state and simulate a delay of a few seconds before marking the task as completed. Set timeout is ideal for this. And once you do that, everything works fine.